What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the 5280 podcast on the MHRT Network. I'm your host, as always, Mundungus Creevy, alongside my co-host Cameron Parker, Glenn Hauser, and Gage Madrid. What's up, fellas?
What is up?
What up? What up?
So, not a huge news week. Not a lot going on, but there are some things to talk about, and I kind of want to start it off with a, let's call it a weird question, but it's going to be entertaining. At least I hope so. So, we're going to start it off with this. Someone comes up to you and offers you $2 million to return a kick 15 yards. Now, the rules are you cannot take a knee. You can't fair catch it. You can't run out of bounds. You can't run backwards to the end zone. You have to gain 15 yards, and you cannot fumble. Now, the kickoff team that is blocking for you is the Vanderbilt College kickoff team. The people that are coming to tackle you are Ray Lewis, Brian Urlacher, Derek Brooks, John Lynch, Lawrence Taylor, Warren Sapp, Brian Dawkins, Steve Atwater, Ed Reed, Bill Romanowski, and Aaron Donald, all in their primes. You have to get 15 yards without fumbling to get the $2 million. Are you even going to try?
The first question I would probably ask to that, Mike, is what is health insurance covered?
$2 million, that's all you get.
Then I'm sorry, I'm not going to take it. As long as health insurance is covered, I'm not gonna take it.
No way in hell, man. That would be. First of all, I can only run like half speed still because of my injury, so I can't even sprint. So I wouldn't even make it.
Rod out there.
But you have the what is it? The I forget what. You do have the thing that you were using at training camp. So I mean,
that'd slow me even more. I think I could probably just run normal even faster than having to push that piece of crap around.
Just spinning it over his head like, come get me.
It's like it's like I can kind of jog, but yeah, no, man. No way in hell. I'd make it maybe 2 yards, lose the ball, and probably be in a fetal position on the ground trying to collect my air. And I would wake up the next day with about 100 bruises and possibly 2 more broken bones. So I'm good.
Could you do it, Glenn?
I would at least try. My main concern would be, would Ray Lewis be wearing a white suit or a Raven suit?
Either way, which one's more dangerous is the question.
The white suit's a little bit more permanent. So
yeah,
you gotta try.
You got to try though, right? But then the next question is, who are you more afraid of getting hit by? Out of all of those names,
it doesn't matter. Like
all of them.
Yeah,
Dawkins, I think, because he's faster than any of those guys that you need.
Was Ed Reed in that list?
Ed Reed is on that list.
Yeah, him. He has murdered guys on the field. Oh God.
I mean, you're talking about all these guys with like full heads of steam.
It doesn't matter to me. I mean, a kill shot, the kill shot. And, I will say the 90s movies in me is just in my head right now. And all I could think about is, the scene in Little Giants where he says, I'm going to hit you so hard you'll be talking out of your butt. That's basically what basically what it would feel like after that is I would not only be hit so hard to be talking out of my butt, but I also would be sent back to the second grade as well.
Listen, Cam, anyone that's watched this show knows you talk out of your ass most of the time.
Every Tuesday, every once in a while, every other Tuesday.
Like, out of all the people on this list, I actually think I'm more scared of Bill Romanowski. He'd hit you hard and then like poke you in the eyes and punch you in the nuts while you're going down.
Still, it's a subjective list because we're talking about also Aaron Donald, who was also swinging helmets, by the way. So
I forgot about Donald doing that. That was a long time ago.
So
yeah. So this is how you know we're in like that inside the month before the draft. You named the show Broncos lose Little Jordan Humphrey, and then we start out with talking about the Vanderbilt special teams unit. So
exactly.
Yeah.
That's how we roll. Now I have
Why the Vanderbilt special teams unit?
Because that's what was listed on the question when I found it.
Gotcha.
Like you give Vanderbilt. Like you don't want to give anybody too good, right?
It doesn't matter who it would be
like. Right, but at the same time, you don't want to be like, oh, you get a high school kickoff return team. No.
Even if you got like, let's just say Georgia's special team unit, that would still be a mismatch nightmare, even if it was just against the worst NFL team on the planet. That would still be like, oh, God, you're fucked.
Yep.
All right. Second question, and this one is more Broncos related. Who is the greatest Bronco player to never win a Super Bowl?
Man.
Champ Bailey.
I think that was going to be my answer too. Would be, but I also think that would be a pretty easy answer to it to a certain degree. But I think that we also have to like recognize like some of the other players who,
and I think there's two big ones, right? Like there's Bailey and Gradishar.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a bunch of other potential Hall of Famers that could be in there too.
I know one.
Was on.
And without this player, the Denver Broncos franchise would not be in existence today, most likely, and that's Floyd Little.
Yeah.
But I think that if you're kind of looking at it too, of like some of those other people that were probably in, and I actually feel like you could really name anybody within, the John Elway era where like he would go to Super Bowls and not win. You could really name anybody that was in, that timeline that didn't get a chance to win any Super Bowl. And then the other part of it too is you could really name any other players too, like of that first Manning era that didn't get a chance to win a Super Bowl, like Champ Bailey. I think the other one that I think that probably at least deserves some credit is specifically now, since we have our best left tackle currently on the roster in Garrett Bowles since this particular other guy, I think Ryan Clady would be another one, as far as a player that, would be deserving of a Super Bowl. And then the other one, of course, would have been, Derek Wolfe, but obviously Derek Wolfe got his ring in 2015.
Clady technically did too. He was just injured that year, so I think he's got the ring. He just wasn't a part of the team.
We could even go with a Dennis Smith, a Louis Wright.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of players. A Billy Thompson. Like I mentioned, Tom Jackson earlier. Tom played double digits in seasons his entire career as a Bronco. Emotional leader. Could be considered a Hall of Famer as a player, but also a broadcaster at the same time.
Dennis Smith too, right? Like did you say Dennis Smith? Yeah.
But that's the Rick Upchurch. Rick Upchurch.
Steve Watson.
Are we counting the short?
I was building up to that.
Are we counting the short-termers too, like Brian Dawkins, John Lynch?
I mean,
like I know John Lynch has the ring, but not with the Broncos.
I think the thing for me with Brian Dawkins is I don't know about Super Bowl, but I do know that Brian Dawkins falls into the category of he's probably one of the players that gets forgotten about, in terms of being one of the great Bronco players that, had been, with the organization. And actually, I think that the 2011 Broncos defense in general actually gets forgotten about how good that defense really was. Specifically, when you have Von Miller, it's the first year of Von Miller, and you have Alvis Dumervil, basically, one on each side. And then, I think you had DJ Williams, I think at that point, so I think that, and of course, you had Champ Bailey, of course. I think he had Champ Bailey, Al Wilson. Like the defense was stacked for that 2011 team. So I think that Brian Dawkins probably would not probably fall in that, although he's probably a player that you wish would have won a Super Bowl just in general.
Well, and there's potentially another one in Justin Simmons. Not like up to the level of like a Mecklenburg or a Gradishar or Champ Bailey, but
still,
Justin Simmons is beloved in Denver.
Very much so.
He's a Ring of Famer. I mean, I would say.
Very much so a Ring of Famer. And if anybody does not believe he's a Ring of Famer, need to get stapled to a wall.
Wow, that's violent. All right,
violent is Gage flipping off Derek Wolfe in his Tesla today.
Right? How dare you, Gage?
It wasn't hard to put 2 and 2 together there, Gage.
I'll read that text for anybody that has no idea what we're talking about. Derek Wolfe sent out a tweet that said, "Nothing like a chubby redhead cutting you off stopping in the middle of the road to flip you off for driving a Tesla." And then I texted, "How are you going to pick a fight with Derek Wolfe, Gage?"
I gotta be honest, that is totally something I would have done. Not the cutting off part, but I totally would have shot up the middle finger at the Tesla. Just saying.
And you know what's funny is all in this news cycle, I don't know if you guys found out too, but like apparently one of the players that the Denver Broncos is heavily interested in is a guy by the name of Isaac Tesla, a wide receiver from Arkansas. So it's just based on what I was reading today. So yeah, that's kind of funny.
So you're saying the Broncos have keyed in on Isaac Tesla?
Maybe not keyed, but maybe they found their Cybertruck.
Little topical bad jokes.
Wow. Anyway. All right, I don't want to expand on that because that goes in a bad area. Getting into Broncos stuff. Obviously, since the last time we had a show, Evan Ingram has signed with the Denver Broncos, which is incredible. He lives in Nebraska.
Sorry, Mike.
Everybody knows.
My condolences, Mike.
Around here,
Listen,
it's like
as long as it's not a Cybertruck, okay?
They're so ugly.
They're so ugly.
By the way, what also is it with Tesla owners who drive really, really fast? Also, I've seen that in the last couple weeks where Tesla owners they just drive like a bat out of hell. I don't understand.
Have any of you guys driven a Tesla before? Those things can fly.
No.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to condone the idea of driving fast. I'm just saying they just have driven really, really fast.
Let's just say getting on the freeway in one is fun.
I don't know around here where I'm going to charge it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Mike has a hard time charging his phone. I mean, so he's
I
in the
do.
boonies.
He'll just treat it like
I've got to find a signal just to be able to charge it.
Mike only has one single power outlet in his entire house.
I was just going to say
that's not far from the truth.
75 plugs into it.
That's why the last show Gage had to say, "Hey guys, we're still live," because I dropped all power and internet. See? So the proof's in the pudding.
Well, I was going to say in support of Mike there with his vehicle, unlike a DeLorean, his car probably would be powered by Mountain Dew.
No.
If we could find a way to power vehicles on Mountain Dew, that would solve almost every world issue known to mankind.
Except for the heartburn.
Facts.
There'd be no corrosion because of it.
And just so everyone knows, I have not drinking a Mountain Dew in 2 weeks. I have stopped drinking Mountain Dew. So
congratulations, good sir.
I hate it.
Yeah. I still have my raging caffeine and sugar addiction, Coca-Cola in here.
There we go. I'll start drinking Mountain Dew again when Glenn buys a Tesla.
Yep, I think
I'm kind of a Jeep guy, though. That's the thing.
All right. So again, back to the Broncos stuff. Aside from Gage flipping off Derek Wolfe.
It's so good.
I hope Derek sees this too. Is like, oh, that's who it was.
I'm not coming on MHRT anytime soon.
Just give him the finger and goes, "Hey, you want to come back on the show?"
Yeah.
No comment, Wolfie. No comment.
There we go. So the Broncos get Evan Ingram, but we also lose Lil Jordan Humphrey to the Giants.
No.
Like we've said in the past, does that really matter? Like, can Lil Jordan Humphrey just leave already?
Oh man, I'm so.
Well, I mean, after today's news, he should have a stupendous year.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
Reuniting with his old quarterback, baby.
Reunited and it feels so good. You better get deep, or otherwise he's not getting the ball.
But you can guarantee that he will be a blocking demon.
Facts. A block.
He's gonna have to. They don't have any other blockers.
Well, he also has to because Russell Wilson will be running out of sacks, every third drive.
Yep.
True. So, and just in case people don't know that news either, just came across Russell Wilson signing with the Giants, who also has Jameis Winston. I'd go with Winston over Russ at this point, but whatever.
1,000%.
Drew Lock gets bounced again for Russ. Yeah.
Did he sign anywhere?
No, it's just like if you look at Drew Lock's career, how so Russ leaves and then Drew Lock goes to Seattle, and then obviously the Giants, right? He goes to the Giants.
Uh-oh, the wife's knocking. Keep talking.
Yeah. So, and then basically you go from that to Russ to the Giants. It's pretty hysterical.
Yeah. He just needs to go to Pittsburgh now to complete the full Russell Wilson arc.
They don't have anybody.
Yeah. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibilities, but I think we should at least touch a little bit on little Jordan Humphrey just for a second here, because we were having a little bit of a conversation about this in the pregame, and I feel like bringing in Evan Ingram, it's not an apples to apples comparison. I don't think that Evan Ingram is going to be blocking anywhere near the high level that little Jordan Humphrey was, but I do think that they do fill a similar type of role. Big slot. You can play him in line sometimes, but that's just not really their cup of tea. So that's kind of why I felt like little Jordan Humphrey was not destined to be back, and also why the Broncos didn't bring in a guy like Cooper Kupp, because I think they envision Evan Ingram to step into that role. I know Cam has a slightly differing opinion on this.
Yeah. Well, I just think that for little Jordan Humphrey in general, like for what he was doing and for what he was offering, it's a very, very replaceable role. Like I'm not trying to drag on little Jordan Humphrey also, because I think that the type of player that he is in terms of blocking his tail off and making catches every third time, aside from ruining your young quarterback every once in a while with some costly fumbles here every second game or whatever like that. But I just think that when you think about just his overall player style, you can easily replace that with some of the players that you already have on your roster, guys like a Devon Bailey, or possibly even Courtland Sutton, depending on some opportunities that they want to do there, or even into the draft as well. There are many directions the Broncos can go here to replace a guy like that, and I think that for Evan Ingram, he's not going to be replacing the little Jordan Humphrey blocking impact, but I think that he could certainly impact the big slot impact. But no, little Jordan Humphrey was a very, very, very replaceable role on this team.
I don't know why he fell out of such favor with Broncos country, but toward the end there, he was one of the most unpopular players, if not on the team. And I personally liked him. We were certainly pushing for him to gain some weight and perhaps step into that tight end role. Broncos country tonight, the other night, actually said that the Broncos wanted him back, but he thought he had a better opportunity with the Giants. And and I wish him well. I mean, he served, like you said, Cam. He served a specific role. He didn't cost us very much. I think it was just over $1 million in salary a year. So it wasn't like we were really, cutting into our salary cap by having him on the roster. And he played a lot. I mean, he was on the field for quite a bit last year. But now he's got, like Mike said, he better learn to sprint down the field, because that's the moonshots are all that's going to be thrown in New York.
Or they'll just have to keep him in as a sixth blocker on every single play to give Russ some resemblance of a chance to throw.
And now we can kind of see like the mind of Joe Shane and how he wants to build this Giants team. Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, no offensive line, no running back, Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, and little Jordan Humphrey. Congratulations. Like, your team sucks.
Wait till they grab Travis Hunter. Like, that's a distinct possibility, isn't it?
Maybe. Me personally, I would hope that they don't, in terms of, take them off the board of doing the smart thing of taking a quarterback there at 3. But I just think that, to what you're saying though, Glenn, I think it's really important that we do say that, because I think that, players like little Jordan Humphrey and blocking his tail off and everything, there's a reason why people who are former coaches or just coaches in general appreciate those players, because they all appreciate players that do the dirty work. And little Jordan Humphrey was 100% a player who couldn't do the dirty work. I hate to even, go back to a little bit more of a 90s reference, but it's just like, it's the Rudy example, if this player had the, even a tenth of the heart of Rudy, you would have been an All-American, right? Like, that's the kind of player that, coaches always love and appreciate. And that was kind of little Jordan Humphrey, is like, he is putting 100% the effort every single play. Unfortunately, it's just with what he was doing was a bit of a replaceable situation.
Mm-hmm.
Well said.
So we go from losing a wide receiver to talking about the potential loss of another wide receiver in Courtland Sutton. Is he potentially getting priced out of the Broncos' range with the signing of Stephon Diggs?
He might be. Stephon Diggs just got $23 million average annual value over 3 years. When you actually peel back the layers of the onion on it, though, it's basically a 1-year deal, $26 million guaranteed, and then the club has options after that, because there's not going to be guaranteed money after basically that first year. But yeah, man, $23 million average annual value. Sutton's going to look at that and say, hey, I should be worth more than that. Stephon Diggs had a torn ACL last year, and he wasn't even really playing at a high level. I'm playing at a much higher level than that. I could go out there and I could get $25 million, maybe even a little bit more than that. And the Broncos have to ask themselves, are they willing to pay that much per year to a guy like Courtland Sutton? It's getting to be pricey, man. I'm still leaning towards yes, but I can also understand the Broncos maybe opting to get younger at wide receiver, like Cam was saying pregame through the draft. I know he'll probably expand a little bit more on that, but I think that this might be that opportunity for the Broncos here if they want to move on, because it's getting really expensive.
But are you talking about moving on before this season or after the season? Because he is under contract.
He's under contract. I mean, I think he's going to want at least some protection, some incentives, kind of like what they did last year, because he's got no guaranteed money on his deal right now, $0. So if he gets hurt, he's kind of in trouble. I think that might be what could motivate Sutton's camp to want to get something done in terms of maybe a trade. I don't see it. I think he's still here. I think they give him some incentives at the bare minimum. And I still think that we're maybe even talking about an extension, because I talked about this in a video. We haven't heard anything from Courtland Sutton yet in terms of him wanting a new deal, him wanting out. That kind of tells me that maybe the Broncos and him have a gentleman's agreement that they're going to get something done after the draft or something like that,
Yeah, I don't think that this is like a losing Courtland Sutton this year thing. I think it's more of a will he sit out or hold out or something like that.
I think after last season and him getting the flack that he did get, and then all of a sudden developing this relationship with this rookie quarterback. I mean, they were at the Nuggets game the other night together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're personally hanging out. Were they at the Avs the next night?
Nuggets game. Nuggets and Avs game, yeah.
So they were there. So what I would like is last year when they did tweak his contract, it was really based on performance incentives. And so it really wasn't the Broncos giving him any sort of a bump. It was him earning that extra money, which he did, fortunately. I would like to see, like Gage was saying, I'd like to see them give him some additional cash and some guarantees, not to the level of like what Diggs got. I think that's just insane. But I think low 20s, but not make him have to earn these bumps in his salary. I think let's just reward him with that extra money, and not put it in as a performance and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think that with Cortland, the thing that is just even so different also, when you look at it from the standpoint of like last year, the Broncos don't necessarily have leverage here this time. That was the one thing you could say last year was, the Broncos, had some of that leverage because of the year that Sutton had that year previous, right? But now that he put forth his best seasons to Denver Bronco, it's backed up now to the point where he probably should be getting the $20 million a year. Now, if his camp is secretly pushing the $30 million a year type of thing, I'm way out on that. And look, and I understand market value. I understand the fact that, we might be entering NBA contracts when you look at strictly the wide receiver position. But I just think that if you're looking at it from the $30 million a year, I am way out on that. So if you are getting him for anything just a bit above $20 million a year, that would probably be ideal. But also then, like, if you actually strip it down to the to even just the draft, you kind of look at it, and the Broncos' best decision moving forward might actually not be going running back at 20, and not just from the idea of, going out and getting a defensive lineman or, an edge rusher or even a linebacker or a safety. Their best bet might actually going the offensive route that the Eagles have gone in terms of addressing a need before a need. And I posted that on Twitter, because if you look at it and the way that the chips are falling right now, you'll probably have it's sort of based on where the cookie is crumbling right now, is like you'll have Tetaroa McMillan, who's currently falling right now at 20. You'll have Emeka Egbuka. You'll have Luther Burden, maybe Matthew Golden, depending on what happens there and the smoke that's going to be generating there. So, like, there are going to be some really good wide receivers available for you at 20, maybe more so than like a guy like an Amari and Hampton. So it's just like, I don't know. If you ask me, I'm probably would be leaning the routes of like the Emeka Egbukas, the Tetaroa McMillans, because I do know that obviously Sean loves those big wide receivers. So McMillan, if he just magically is there at 20, I don't see how the Broncos pass on that opportunity.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'm somebody who firmly believes that they should take best player available. And if McMillan falls to 20, he would without a doubt be the best player available. So that's kind of a no-brainer.
Landon has to continue his Nate Atkins bit.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm all for the Nate Atkins propaganda. I love me some Nate Atkins.
Same. And I don't want to, when I'm talking about the money aspect of the wide receiver position, I'm not necessarily pinpointing it just on Cortland. So I'm not saying that he's not worth it. I think we're at a stage where that position, some of these salaries, I don't think anyone should be like these receivers getting paid more than $30 million. Just absolutely bananas in my opinion. I mean, look at where the Cowboys are. They've got $90 million tied in between a receiver and a quarterback.
Bengals
of their salary cap. Yeah. Oh my gosh, the Bengals. They're going to score a ton of points and
not be able to stop anyone.
Right. Like that is
shootouts.
T. Higgins, $30 million plus. I mean, that I don't get it. when Cam just named several receivers that there's a high likelihood that most, if not all, are going to have successful careers in the NFL, and they'll be on rookie contracts for the next 5 years.
And they would be available around the time that the Bengals draft. Like I don't get it.
That's Trey Hendrickson right there. Like I'm the receiver money, and all of a sudden, like you're seeing this flip too with the running backs, and Saquon Barkley has really kind of created that where it had been a running back by committee. We can pay these guys very little. Combined, they can make what a star running back would make, and you have the running back room. But now we're doing more. We're taking these chances on these, creating, the thought that maybe this guy can be the featured back, and we're going to give them more money and whatnot. So it's almost like a flip that we're seeing, between the wide receivers and the running backs. It's an interesting dichotomy.
And that's why I thought, like, for sure, what I posted this is going to get a bit of some traction. And I don't like comparing, both sports, but it's just like to briefly say it. Like, if there is one position group, as I said, that would compare contractually to the NBA, it is the wide receiver room, because you'll have the wide receiver room that's going to be garnering like $30 million to $40 million. Then you'll have wide receiver 2 that's going to be garnering probably $20 million to $30 million, which is going to be the $30 million, which is upwards to the wide receiver 1 money. And then you look at it from the standpoint of wide receiver 3, that's where things are be going between 10 to maybe even 15 or even 20, depending on, that. So like you're looking at, like, when I say NBA contracts, is because the players, right, in the NBA, like the bench players are making almost like the 10 to 15 million a year contract. So, and then you go to wide receiver 3 and 4, like it's just going to be a bit crazy there with, how those things are possibly going to get divvied up.
Do you think 2 $15 million receivers are better than one $30 million receiver?
It makes you wonder, right? Yeah.
I think so.
No.
Like it's the Moneyball. It's a bizarre Moneyball logic, but it is almost Moneyball logic, right? Like it's just like, if you're going to be replacing, these powerful hitters, right? Like, why not replace 2 for 1? Like it's such a novel concept.
I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs did it, and they won 2 Super Bowls. The reason why they didn't win this year wasn't because of receiver play. It was because they didn't have an offensive line. And they don't have a true number 1 receiver.
Yet,
yeah. I mean, they might come next year because Worthy is starting to settle into that role. But
yeah, he's got a stranglehold on that role for sure.
It is for sure.
Oh, boy.
The joke doesn't even work anymore.
That's what you think.
All right, so outside of that, there's really
I got it.
Yeah.
There's been no real player movement Broncos wise. So when you take a look at the AFC West, Kansas City Chiefs, you look at the Los Angeles Chargers, you look at the Las Vegas Raiders and the Denver Broncos. How do you see the AFC West shaking out before we even get to the draft?
It is far more open than it ever has been. Look, I think the smart man would definitely say that the Chiefs are winning it, but I think that it's closing. I think it is legitimately closing. That gap is closing. Even we can biasly say the Broncos are closing the gap, but also the Chargers are closing that gap. And I think the Raiders are even kind of closed that gap just a little bit. But even then, they're behind still the Broncos and of course the Chargers there. But the Chargers, they add a few more weapons there for Justin Herbust. I mean, you're talking about a bit more of a competent offense there. So they add Colston Loveland or an Elijah Arroyo somewhere into this draft, or maybe even a Jaden Higgins to their type of offense to go along with a Ladd McConkey. You're talking about a bit more of a competent type of offense there. So I think it is significantly closed more than I think people realize.
Yep. And I think when you look at things objectively on paper right now, Kansas City, they've got Andy Reid, they've got Patrick Mahomes, they still got whatever they're going to get out of Travis Kelce next year. Worthy, if he steps up, could be that receiver one. They're most likely going to get Rashee Rice back at some point next year. If he serves a suspension or not, we don't know. So obviously, it like Cam said, if you're smart, then you're going to say the Chiefs will win it. But the Broncos, man, they are adding so much talent to this roster, and they are filling so many needs, putting the surrounding cast around Bo Nix where he can take his game to the next level. The Broncos already have a better defense in terms of depth than the Kansas City Chiefs do. There's no doubt about that. And when you look at, let's say we compare them between the Chargers and the Broncos, for example, I got to be honest, Bo Nix has shown more of a clutch gene over his career than Justin Herbert has.
In just a 3 year.
Yeah. And Justin Herbert has the physical talent of a top 4 or 5 quarterback in the NFL, but he fails to deliver in the biggest moments, time in and time out. Bo Nix elevates his play to his highest level when the game matters most, when it's in crunch time. And that, I feel like, is what closes the gap for me between the Broncos and the Chargers. Now, we just have to worry about closing that gap between the Broncos and the Chiefs. I think it's going to shake out to where the Broncos are second place in the AFC West behind the Chiefs, but I think it's going to be only a 1 or 2 game difference. I think that the Broncos are easily going to win more games than they did last year. I'm expecting an 11-12 win season for the Denver Broncos in 2025.
When you look at the Chiefs in the Super Bowl this year, I mean, they lost that game before the game even started. And I'm personally shocked that Travis Kelce was coming back after seeing his performance. It was just so lackluster. It was just, he normally doesn't look old. He looked very, very old.
Yeah.
And that's Pat's guy. And then Gage talked about their offensive line being terrible. They just shipped off their best lineman, even though he's, Tooney, 9 years, 6 Super Bowls in 9 seasons between the Patriots and the Chiefs. That is unheard of. Mm-hmm. He's gone. He's with the Bears now. And one of the beautiful things too is right now when you look at this Broncos roster, there's only one glaring hole that needs to be filled right now, and it's at the running back position. We've set ourselves up that we have so much across the board talent, depth, works that we're in such a great position. I agree with you, Gage. I think that you have to still suggest that at this point Kansas City is going to win the division, but I mean, I don't think that anyone's going to be sitting players that last week of the season. I think it's going to boil down to that last game.
And we say every year when we do the schedule release or schedule predictions that the sweet spot for division is always 4-2, right? That they have to go 4-2. It's the same thing every year, but it rings true this particular, upcoming year. Like teams, not just the Broncos, but like teams have to go 4-2 in division for them to like legitimately have a good enough chance. Like that's exactly how good this division is. And I agree. I think the Broncos truly have closed this gap. And I mean, even regardless of the fact that, they don't have a running back, you just know that Peyton is going to be good enough in terms of scheming some of these players open, where it's not going to be, as big of a problem, even though we all know running back is a very large problem. But I just think that they have closed it, even for the skill part of this. Like, look, there might actually be a legitimate argument where, the Broncos might actually have the second best tight end in the division. And that's because of Travis Kelce's fall off, right? And you look at the season that he had, like it wasn't the season that he had normally. And I think the reason why he would be fitting into that second, tight end of the division is because of notoriety. There's a legit argument with the way that the Broncos are going to be using Evan Ingram that he is going to be maybe close to 100 type of targets, type of player, even right out of the gate in terms of the 2025 season. So like they're going to be having a lot of really good safety nets. And I think the other part of that is Sean is an offensive-minded coach, right? Like, and the only other offensive-minded coach that's in that division is Andy Reid. Pete Carroll's a bit of a defensive-minded guy. He's going to be establishing his culture there, with the Vegas Raiders. But do you give an offensive staff or an offensive head coach his quarterback and the options to build weapons around his quarterback that he is so stubborn and bullish on? It is kind of a nightmare scenario. And then you factor in the ownership group, where it's been well documented so far this year, where there are players who want to play with you defensively or offensively. So, like, it's to quote George Payton from many years back, the Broncos truly are a sleeping giant.
They are. But we do have to at least talk about the Raiders, I feel like, because they're easy to sort of gloss over, but they've made some moves to make their team better this offseason. And I think the biggest move that they made that's going under the radar is bringing in Geno Smith at quarterback. Geno Smith is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I'm sorry, he is. The Seahawks were an awful situation last year. Their offensive line was the worst in the NFL. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett were both on the decline. The only reliable weapons that Geno had were Jackson Smith-Njigba and, ironically enough, Noah Fant. Those were basically his only reliable weapons. He had some injuries he had to deal with his running backs. Both Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker had missed time at various points. So that offense was a mess, and Geno carried them to a 10-win season. That cannot be understated, and I think the Raiders actually are in a better situation right now. They've got a young, emerging offensive line. They're most likely going to take Ashton Genty in the draft. That's pretty much a foregone conclusion right now. Receiver leaves a little bit to be desired. Jacoby Myers is really good. Trey Tucker stepped up for them. Somebody else stepped up for him last year. I can't remember who off the top of my head. But they've got some pieces there. They've obviously got Brock Bowers, who could be the best tight end in the division. Let's just call it. Yeah, he could be, man. Yeah. Like, he is truly an elite playmaker at that position. And their defense is starting to get healthy. Max Crosby was beat up all year last year. He played through it, but he wasn't himself. Christian Wilkins, their big-ticket free agent signing, he missed most of last year. I believe he actually got hurt in the first Denver game, and he missed the entire year. He's going to be back. Malcolm Kuntz, one of their edge rushers, who Max Crosby was gassing up, saying he was primed for a big year. He blows his knee out in the indoor training facility a week before the season starts. Tyree Wilson, their former first-round pick, hopefully he steps up for them. Or obviously not hopefully for us, but hopefully for them he steps up. They've got pieces in that room. And when you combine it with Pete Carroll changing the culture there, we've got to pay attention to this Raiders team. They're not going to be an easy out like they were last year.
Yeah, and that wraps up another episode of Raiders Syndicate, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.
And I've actually got the AFC West shaken out different. I've still got the Raiders last, but then I've got the Chiefs third, Chargers second, Broncos first. And I think there's going to be like a 1 or 2 game separation there, right? Like, I think the Broncos go 11 or 12 wins, the Chargers go 10 or 11, and then you've got the Chiefs going 9 or 10. Like, there's going to be that 1 or 2 game difference. But I think the Chiefs are going to have that Super Bowl hangover after the loss. Plus, they're still going to struggle with their offensive line. And I don't know if they're going to be able to repeat what they did this last year. And with the additions and the improvements from the Broncos and the Chargers, I just don't know if the Chiefs are going to have the offensive line to have the offense to stick with the Chargers and the Broncos.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I was going
to say, one of the great things about the Broncos offseason too is that, even though we've identified certain holes, that from the get-go, they weren't desperate in their signings. The fact that we still have not brought in a veteran running back into that room is, I think, brilliant at this point, because they're going to have their pick after the draft and decide whether they're even going to bring somebody in from the outside. All those guys have some warts on them, but we seem to be the only team that's not like just been so hasty in our signings. I mean, the Patriots today giving Stephon Diggs, like $26 million guaranteed, coming off of an injury. He's still not fully healed. With his attitude getting worse over the last couple of years and being more disgruntled, I mean that seems like a very desperate signing to me, and the Broncos haven't done that. So it just makes me more excited about the future that we have these. George Payton loves to use the word measured, but we have these measured leaders on our in our front office and on our coaching staff.
I couldn't agree more. I will say this though, in terms of the desperation, I do think there was still a sense of desperation on some of these moves, specifically when you're hearing of, what was being reported about, some of the teams swooping in and trying to get some of the free agents. So I think there's probably a sense of desperation to try and close the deal. And I also think if there's like one player that I would say like for desperation would probably be Evan Ingram, because I do think there was like legitimate interest between the Broncos and Juwan Johnson, but the moment that Evan Ingram was released, I think the Broncos kind of pulled it. For anybody to a bit of history lesson may not remember this, but it kind of reminded me a little bit of the 2014 season, in free agency, where if you guys don't remember that, like Jared Allen was like close to being a Denver Bronco, and then DeMarcus Ware was released. I'm not saying that this is going to result in a Super Bowl, by the way, but DeMarcus Ware was released, and the Broncos did a complete 180, said, "We love you, Jared, but we're going to go to a different ring store. We're going to go to the ring of DeMarcus and basically bring him in." And so that's basically what happened. I feel like is they were really showing interest in Juwan Johnson, but Evan Ingram got available, and they're like, we have to act fast.
Yep. And bringing in Evan Ingram is not going to stop the Broncos from taking Tyler Warren if he becomes within striking distance. They could trade up and get him still very realistically. I do think that he might take Colston Loveland off the board because, I don't know, I think that they might be looking for more a true Y inline tight end. Like I've been
play
preaching
inline,
on the
by the way.
channels. Yeah. You can't. So you can go with somebody like Loveland who can do that. But I'm just thinking like, Mason Taylor, maybe if they want to go even more old school, Terrence Ferguson, bring him back, one of Bo Nix's old weapons from Oregon.
Stay my guy. Come on.
Oh, who am I supposed to say here?
Thomas Fedoti. Come on now.
Oh my God. Thomas Fedoni. Yes, the Nebraska tight end. Got to give those Nebraska guys some love. I'll admit I have not watched a lot of his tape yet. I got to get to him.
It's understandable. Nebraska's been sucking for the last handful of years, so it's understandable why you haven't been paying attention.
It's a priority that falls down the list, I'm sure. But when Ingram caught his 114 passes, he wasn't even a 1,000-yard receiver that season. I mean so he was averaging just short of 8.5 yards per catch on that. Can you imagine how many more first downs we're going to be converting on with these quick passes from Bo Nix to Evan Ingram next year? I mean, these drives are. And then all of a sudden the defense gets stronger because they get more time on, to rest, and the offense is burning clock, and it just. I mean, all of these things, all these pieces, they just build to a more successful unit on the offensive side, the defensive side, and the whole team.
And one of the big advantages of putting Evan Ingram in the slot, where I think he's going to line up most of his snaps here in Denver, is he's going to be lined up against small nickel corners. He's going to have some mismatch nightmares there. Now, as far as lining him up like in line, he can still have some good mismatch nightmares against linebackers. He could torch some linebackers in man coverage. He's got that straight line speed to do that. But the short and intermediate game, I'm glad we're talking about this. This is where I think Evan Ingram is going to thrive. Just those short passes where he can get those yards after catch, that's going to be huge for this team.
Well, and you look at Ingram and like his overall career, like if I'm Evan Ingram, I had to have circled the fact that Sean Payton was interested in me, and that had nothing. Maybe Jeremy Shockey and Jimmy Graham had a lot to do with that, with what Sean be able to do. But like he is going to be going into the best possible situation of his career. The best possible situation of his career. The only downside of it really is health, and I think that's one of the reasons why. That's probably one of the biggest negatives, if you will, because you have to call it for what it is, of the Broncos free agency class, is you are banking on a lot of these guys to be healthy. But a lot of that is, well, the Broncos, for the most part, have had a very, very, very clean slate when it comes to that, injury report. And so I think that when you are free agents, and this is something we even talked about like a while ago, is like when you are an impending free agent, I would be looking at the Broncos because of that reason. And so for Ingram to be going into a situation like this where he can be able to thrive, knowing the fact he's healthy week in and week out, is a massive plus. And so I think that if you're the Broncos, one thing I would also do, and it's one of the reasons why I feel like wide receiver still has to be on the table for them at 20, is they can't have just one safety net and it be Evan Ingram. They have to be able to have not just the safety net of Cortland Sutton either. Like they have to have another weapon that's going to be eating the middle of the field. That's still, whether that's going to be a Devon Bailey or, an Emeka Egbuka or even a Luther Burden. Like they have to be able to exhaust as many options, because I guarantee you Bo Nix will thank you in many years to come, knowing the fact that he's got Evan Ingram, Cortland Sutton, Egbuka, or even Burden, for the long haul.
Yep.
But
and with all these – go ahead.
I was going to say, how fortunate are we that we're facing a draft where the running back position is deep, the tight end position is deep, and those are areas that we do want to address, whether in the first round or in subsequent rounds. But I did want to ask, especially Gage and Cam, of the tight ends. Well, I mean, Mike, you can jump in, but I mean, but those guys particularly, are draft gurus on the show. And so of the tight ends that realistically could be available to us, and I'm taking Warren off the table because I'd be shocked if he fell remotely close to 20. Who is your dream pick for tight end of any of the guys left in that draft?
It's hard for me to say, because I think that because of the Evan Ingram signing, they can go a million different ways now. I think there's one that's a good option, and then there's another one that's also another good option. That is drafting, like what Gage was saying, like an inline type of tight end, to pair with Evan Ingram, who's a bit versatile and explosive and still has that ceiling enough to where he can be the type of tight end, post Evan Ingram. But I think that, where it gets interesting is, why not go a bit of a New England Patriots type of situation with what they had with, Rob Gronkowski and, and Hernandez for the brief period that was, and be a bit explosive at the tight end position. Why not go out and still maybe draft a Colston Loveland, or, why not be a bit aggressive? And, I think the one that I think is the fun situation for me is, if I'm actually Harold Fannin, this is a fantastic opportunity for me, because now I have the opportunity to come in, play second fiddle, learn the blocking technique, which I think is something that needs to be reiterated here, is they can still draft a receiving tight end. And this is something even Sean and George have talked about, is you can teach run blocking. Like it's a teachable trait. Like you can teach that. So if you draft a Harold Fannin and you teach him to be a bit more of a capable run blocker, which we all know is something a bit Evan Ingram lacks at times, like you put him to that room with Harold Fannin, and Evan Ingram, that is a dynamic type of situation, because everybody's been saying Fannin might be the most highest ceiling of this class, and I think Elijah Royal might be, not that far behind either with that.
What round from Fannin though?
Probably within that sweet spot of day 2. Because I think the thing we have to remember is, if one player that probably was suspected to go round 4 was taken round 2, it's going to cause a massive stir for teams, to start kind of panicking, and you get to see a run on tight end. So I just think that like I would not be the least bit surprised if Harold Fannin or even a Fedoni or like players that you don't expect to be there day 2 start coming off the board in day 2 because of that.
And so I have a round 3 grade on Harold Fannin. So if you were able to get him in that late second round, maybe into the third round, I'd be okay with that. And with Fannin, if you've got him here for a couple of years to develop under Evan Ingram and then turn him loose, say in 2026, 2027, that could be really intriguing. I still think you need an inline option regardless of what you do, but it's about the conversation of what direction do the Broncos want to go with their early priority at tight end. Like you said, Cam, do they want to bring in a guy who is similar in skill set to Evan Ingram to develop behind him, or do they want to bring in somebody who complements Evan Ingram and does some of the things that Evan Ingram is a little bit deficient in? I think that I'd go in that direction. That's why I've said guys like Mason Taylor, Terrence Ferguson, guys like that. There's another guy who's like a pure blocking tight end that would go on D3. I do like Luke Lachey, and I actually got to interview him at the Shrine. He's not who I was thinking of, though. There was somebody else.
Gunnar Helm.
No, it's not Gunnar Helm.
I'll option though.
Yeah, I will. I'll think of him soon. But I do like Luke Lachey as well, and getting to interview him was really cool. But it's all about what direction you want to go. I'm more towards the inline, like I've talked about. You need somebody who, quite frankly, is an upgrade over Adam Troutman. He's competent there. If you have to go into this season with Adam Troutman still as your wide tight end, you can survive. But if you want this offense to thrive, you have 2 dynamic tight ends, and Troutman is not a dynamic tight end.
And I will say this just to pander a little bit, but I mean, it makes a ton of sense. Sean Payton is a big proponent, and granted, we haven't necessarily seen that at times in terms of him in his tenure with Denver, kind of appeasing a little bit to the local scene, right? But like this is one year where you actually can do that. Like you can legitimately do that. With a certain position. So I think that if you're looking at strictly the development side of Bo Nix, but also keeping it within the room and making possibly the best room possible of keeping the cohesiveness, Terrence Ferguson really checks that box for you. Like he can play in line, he can be able to be that tight end and also spread out outside, and he's got that chemistry already built with you. With Bo Nix, and something that I think that Ferguson has talked about is how big of an impact Nix has had on his career. So you put them back together in one room together with Evan Ingram, that's a really scary situation at that point, because now you're talking about 2 tight ends that he's going to have the opportunity to have chemistry with.
Yeah. And I love that we're sitting here talking about tight ends and running backs, and that's it. Like no quarterback issues, no coaching issues. So, but I do want to go back to March 20th of 2020. This was the majority of our offense at that time. At quarterback, we had Drew Lock. Running back was Phillip Lindsay. We also had Melvin Gordon, 2020. Cortland Sutton at wide receiver, Noah Fant at tight end, Dalton Reiser at right guard. We had Graham Glasgow at right guard or center. And then we had Jawan James. Good old Jawan James at right tackle. This is where we've come from in 4 seasons. That was our offense.
Yeah.
Horrible.
And not to
discuss COVID shutdown in March 2020 or our offense roster.
They're right there.
Right there, yeah.
Well, and I think that not to maybe address too much of the elephant in the room there, and not to get too much of a heated conversation, but I think that there's a reason why I think that we should be commending the job that George Payton has done. Because, think about that for a second. 2020, he enters the building in 2021, and that 2021 draft class is instrumental to the foundation that is being laid right now as we speak to this roster of not just a Sean Payton-led roster, but a George Payton roster as well, because of guys like Jonathan Cooper, Pat Surtain, Quinn Miners, like all within that draft, and all have been extended and a part of, this Denver Broncos team. And then you transfer further to, some of the other foundations that have been laid in free agency under Sean Payton. So I think that as much as we talk about the sleeping giant aspect of what Payton mentioned, now you pair this to the idea of a head coach and general manager working in a very incredible symbiotic relationship with one another. Like it is a very scary situation. Like, and for teams, because like the fact that you have a general manager who can draft and develop quite well, I think is one where it's such a demon conversation to be had in terms of like for the other league, because it is scary. So like huge kudos to George Payton for getting us out of the situation of Nathaniel Hackett, for getting us out of the situation of Russell Wilson, for trading Bradley Chubb and resulting in Sean Payton. Like it is from top to bottom, it is a great situation to be in.
Mike, can you pull up David's comment again, please? Because
it was like 17. Which one?
No, the last one, the most recent one. It says first season. I think that this cannot be overstated enough. To be honest with you, we're talking about first season. We've not talked about needing a quarterback, coach, GM, and owners. And the last one in particular is the one that stands out to me.
1,000%.
Forget about the fact that we have so much money behind us, and they're making these improvements and making it more of an attractive place. But when you think about what the trust was like, with the bowling kids and the instability with that, it contributed to all of those bad things that were happening to the team at that time.
Yeah.
And it became more obvious after the fact, the damage that was being done by not selling the team earlier. So we are so fortunate that the Walton Penner Group stepped in at the time that they did. When the Celtics are selling for almost $6.2 billion and they got the Broncos for $1.6 billion less than that with a stadium. I think I love this comment from David, because these are the four things that you worry about the most as a football fan, and we're not worried about those for the near future at all.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think it, to give credit to some of the other people of that ownership group, it's like it goes to show you that this ownership group has a bit more stability than I think people realize. I mean, taking Lewis Hamilton out of this, but it's just like, you go from like, the Walton Penner Group, right, and then you go to Condoleezza Rice. I think people don't realize maybe that like Condoleezza is a huge football fan, obviously a Bronco fan, but like, there were rumblings, of course, because the Browns are idiots, but like, there were rumblings of the Browns actually being interested in Condoleezza for like even just a spot in their front office or even a head coaching job. So, and also she had been on the playoff committee for college football. So like she's been integrated with football. So the fact that you have a relationship from Greg Penner to Rob Walton, like it is just the fact that you go even down to Condoleezza, like it is a stable ownership group that I hope people really do realize that.
And with Rob Walton especially, like all he does is shows up to the games and he signs the checks. That is all he does. He's delegated everything to the right people to make the right decisions. Rob Walton knows that he's not a football guy, so let the football people make the football decisions. That has been huge for the overall structural integrity of this team.
Yeah, and that's...
Wait, you haven't seen his weekly spots on the local sports radio, Denver Sports Radio?
Right?
Oh, it's just Jerry Jones that does.
And that's one of the reasons why I feel like when we start getting into the conversation about a new stadium and where it's going to be, that's when we're going to start having the conversations about Rob Walton, because he's going to be the one that's going to be leading the charge on where it's going to go,
at least
how
the finances,
much going to pay for it, right? Like he'll be the one spearheading that project. and then letting Greg Penner do the football stuff.
I don't know.
At least do the football stuff and the stadium deals and things like that. But let Rob Walton take the real estate and the business side of it.
I don't know about that because Rob's old. Like he's actually old, and based on his one,
he still works.
Oh, he had one press conference. He's only appeared in front of the media once, and cognitively, I don't know if Rob is 100% there. This is Greg and Carrie's show to run.
But for the finances and money side of things, that's probably where he would be, into it. But but I will say, like, I hope we don't, be too critical. But I will say, like, as much as we're praising the ownership group and everything, the stadium part is going to be an interesting one. So as much as we're putting the trust and stuff into the ownership group, it will be interesting to see, what is the intentions of this ownership group with the stadium. Obviously, we're going to, have full on, confidence that they're going to make the best decision possible. But like, I'll be remiss that I will be a little bit upset if it is actually moved to DIA. You know what I mean? Like, so like I will be like, I have all the confidence of the world and everything for this ownership group. But like at that point, like that might be the one time where I'm like, man, I don't know if I like this decision, from the ownership group.
But what's cool is that these people are so rich and have such they could build any cost of a stadium out of pocket themselves and not affect their regular lives whatsoever. So they don't have to pacify the taxpayers or even go to them for this type of thing. They could just do their own stadium project with the surrounding development and just pay for it out of pocket. I mean, that is unheard of. Stan Kroenke, and there's very few people that could do that. And the fact that, several of them own the Broncos is a sight to behold, for sure.
I will say, if they ask for public funding for this, that will turn me off a little bit towards them because they don't have to. They can fund the entire thing privately.
Yeah,
the only include the part that the NFL chips in. Like the NFL will always chip in.
Yeah, but no, this should not be on the city of Denver's taxpayers or whatever municipality they do build it in. Hopefully it's still city of Denver because they're the Denver Broncos, not the Commerce City or Lone Tree Broncos.
Yeah.
I am at this point, I am 1,000% sure that the next stadium that within the next 10 years, the Denver Broncos will not be in Empower Field anymore.
Yeah. I think that if you're kind of looking at where the wind is blowing right now, it seems like it's either going to be staying where it's at, or it's probably going to end up being in Lone Tree. That's kind of like how I have that feeling of
I don't think they're like 1,000% sure they're not staying where they're at.
But I think that
they don't own that land.
But I think that when you look at like where with the Broncos situation, the ownership situation, it's like to what everything we're talking about. It's like I think it's so appealing because of the money that they rack in. That like they could be able to create any sort of fan development, anything around what they're doing. And I think that because that's going to end up being the one of the biggest things for fans is like, are they going to be creating a fan experience? Are they going to be doing things like that? It's like, actually, if you look at it, so you have the Ball Arena development that's going to be starting, around Pepsi Center. So that probably would turn things off a little bit as well for creating a bit of a fan experience for Empower Field. But then you go over to Lone Tree with some of the land that they have there, you will have the ability to create something a bit bigger and a bit more, notable for everybody to see as you're driving through and close to, the valley and everything. So you can be able to create your fan experience, your stadium, however it is that you want it, close to the training facility. Like, I think it is truly the best of both worlds. I will say to what listening to some of the listening to others, I think a good business person would be smart to like at least listen to them, but not actually like follow through with it. You know what I mean? Like, so And I think that's one thing too with this ownership group that has been so fascinating is the beginning part of this ownership. We were curious. They don't have any NFL experience, so how are they going to be operating this team? But they sure quickly, learned how in like 6 to 8 months, if you will, on the job.
Yeah. So the last domino that has not fallen yet, and this could affect AFC playoffs, which is why I bring it in there. The Steelers do not really have a quarterback right now, and the only domino to not fall is Aaron Rodgers. Is Aaron Rodgers going to go to the Steelers?
His timeline is his timeline, apparently, and I think that's where it's going toward. But I also would need the Pittsburgh Steelers to do what the Green Bay Packers did and draft Jackson Dart at 21, just to piss Rodgers off.
That'd be hilarious.
That would be
hilarious. It'd be like drafting Kenny Pickett all over again. Not comparing him as players, making that very clear before people come and attack me.
Dart's better. Yeah.
Pretty close.
I think, Dart's got some more physical tools to him, I would say. I think Kenny Pickett is...
I was comparing Pickett to Rodgers.
Oh no!
Oh no! Whoa,
at this point,
they aren't even on the same No, they aren't even on the same stratosphere.
At this point, pretty close.
No. Aaron Rodgers is still a top 12 quarterback in the league. He can still play at a high level. If he actually has an offensive line and has receivers, which I don't know if the Steelers will provide what he actually needs, but in the right situation, Aaron Rodgers is still a high-end quarterback that can raise the ceiling of your football team. He elevated what probably should have been a 2-win Jets roster to win 5 games. So Aaron Rodgers coming in should bring you about 3 or 5 wins on his own.
Like you say that, but Zach Wilson
can you imagine
the Jets than Rodgers did.
No, it is different though. The defense took such a step back last year. It was not the same defense, but we'd be sitting here arguing about this for hours. But regardless, I think Rodgers, his best chance to start is in Pittsburgh, and I think Pittsburgh has shown they're willing to be patient with him in terms of him making his decision if he actually wants to play or not. If they weren't, then just bring back Russell Wilson and call it a day. Obviously, they didn't want to do that. They brought back Mason Rudolph just in case as insurance. If you're starting Mason Rudolph, then God bless your soul. But I do think that they're willing to be patient with Aaron Rodgers, and they're going to give him time to make his decision. And it seems like it's either going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers or retirement for Aaron Rodgers. Yes, the Vikings are out.
So what I heard was the
Mike,
Vikings.
you saying those 2 Jets teams.
Yeah.
The Vikings were talking about it, but never actually really considering it.
Yeah, Mike, you with those 2 Jets teams, you're comparing ayahuasca to oranges right there. But if you think about the Steelers, who's would be happiest in getting Rodgers time? Can you imagine those beat reporters having a locker room with Aaron Rodgers, George Pickens, and DK
Metcalf.
Yeah.
DK. Why am I? DL Hughley is in there too.
But
DK, that would be unbelievable.
But I will say though, this is not the first, because I think it's trending the way of Aaron Rodgers going to the Steelers. This is not the first time Mike Tomlin has been dealing with personalities before. Like, this is not the first time he's dealt with that rodeo before. Like, he could argue he's actually dealt with far worse personalities, that have been on that and actually done quite well with Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, Ben Roethlisberger, and then, like, you had James Harrison, of course. So, like, he's had a lot of personalities to deal with. And so I think that for this, like, this is not his first rodeo. And obviously he dealt with Russell Wilson, of course, too, as well. So it's just like I just think that, there is a real chance, though, that, like, because this is Tomlin we're talking about. Every time it feels like we are doubting Tomlin, he will put forth a team that is still going to end up being a winning record, because we still have yet to see a losing record with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So as much as we talk about probably, this is the year they're going to go, 5-12. I don't know. They have to show it for us to actually, go through with it.
I got to say this, man. Aaron Rodgers objectively is a much better quarterback than Russell Wilson. And he was able to get a playoff season out of Russell Wilson.
Objectively, Fields is better than Wilson, but,
Fields is better than Wilson. That's a fact.
The only thing I don't understand about how Tomlin handled the situation was I don't know why he handled the QB situation in Pittsburgh the way that he did. Because, Fields had that, team running 4-2 the beginning of the year. Did he really need to switch to Russell Wilson? He really didn't need to, because I feel like the end result would have been, the exact same, if not maybe a little bit better, if you still kept with Justin Fields. And frankly, you probably would be having your quarterback conversation at the end of the year with Justin Fields, because if I'm being completely honest, that next team of quarterback needy teams, I'm actually very fascinated about, and that is the New York Jets with Justin Fields, because of Darren Moogie, who it seems pretty obvious with Moogie going there that maybe there was a lot of smoke and fire to the Justin Fields idea in Denver under George Payton. So maybe there was some idea there, and he's going into a situation where they built the offensive line around him, bringing in a center that he's comfortable with, coming from Ohio State. He has his number one wide receiver that he had at Ohio State. It just feels like the Jets are in a much better situation that I think maybe people realize now, knowing the fact that they actually have some continuity in place at that quarterback position.
Yeah, they're empowering. They have empowered. They're going to empower Fields.
Steve wants to know what Denver's doing for a punter. We already signed one. Now, I do know that Mario had talked to Marquette King, and he said he's willing to come back.
I'm in.
We didn't go get destroying from the San Antonio Brahmas.
So I think this punter situation is very fluid. Remember when the Broncos cut Brandon McManus at kicker, they brought in Elliott Fry and Brett Maher for a competition. Neither one of them impressed, and they ended up trading for Will Lutz. I would not be surprised at all if something similar doesn't happen here in Denver. I think that I'm looking towards the draft as a possibility. There are a couple of good punters in the draft. In terms of the XFL, I would not hate bringing back Marquette King. The individual who King had a problem with here in Denver is no longer here, and that's Tom McMahon. McMahon tried to change his kicking style despite King being one of the best placement punters in the NFL, and it led to King getting hurt. He still is bombing balls to this day in the UFL. I mean, he can still bomb them. And bringing him here at altitude, I would be so down for that. And most importantly, he says he's in a much better headspace than he was back in 2018. He says that he's grown as a person a lot during that time. And not being in the NFL and having to go to a spring league, and the fact that he's been a fixture in the XFL dating back to their first stint back in 2020, and now he's been a long-standing face there. So that proves that he's got some of that humbleness to him. So I'm down for that. If maybe Thomas Morstead becomes available on the Jets, he's got history with Sean Payton and with Will Lutz. They're comfortable with each other in terms of that kicker-holder relationship. So I would keep an eye on that. I think that right now, the current punter for the Broncos next year is not on their roster currently. Matt Hawk will not be the Broncos punter next year.
That's exactly what I was going to kind of end it with. Is I don't think the Broncos punter is on the roster. He still might be, Matt Hack, but I mean, we have to find out whether or not he can hack it or not. And
we're not back to these jokes again.
Hey, Broncos signed a guy, with hack. So I mean, I might as well just roll with it again. I'm just saying.
Hack system.
But I just think that the one thing that's going to be a bit interesting here, and if you look at the trend of what the Broncos were doing under Peyton, they were bringing in left-handed punters or left-hand, before in terms of some tryouts, but they never signed him. So if you are looking at it from the side of maybe is the punter already on the roster, probably not, because of the fact that every left-handed, or left-footed punter that they brought on this team, not exactly been the punter here long term.
I will say Corliss Waitman had a really good year in Pittsburgh last year. If they want to maybe think about bringing him back, that's also a possibility.
All right. Anything else that we didn't cover or that you want to talk about?
We caught it all, man.
I think we caught it all.
All right. Well, then I appreciate every single one of you for joining us in the chat, joining us in the show. It's always fun when you guys can get your comments in so we can kind of give our opinions. Make sure you check out all the other shows on the network. We have shows Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Cameron Parker leads mainly Broncos. Normally happens on Wednesdays or any other day that he just decides to pop in on me and like, hey, we're doing a show today. Oh, cool. Make sure you check out Broncos Syndicate with Gage Madrid. That's where I get all my breaking news because I don't have time to scroll through every single podcast and show that's out there. So I get all my stuff from Gage. And then there's Glenn. Him and I just kind of chill during the week. Don't do nothing until Tuesdays. It's kind of fun.
Follow Glenn on Twitter. He's a good follow.
Follow Glenn on Twitter or X, whatever you call it.
For the dad jokes.
Yeah. For the dad jokes. But again, we want to thank everybody for joining us. We will see you hopefully next week. If there's not really anything going on, we might not. It just kind of depends on what's going on. But we will see you guys next time. Peace out.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never